Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to this webinar organized by the Netherlands Environmental Law Association, or Vereniging van Milieurecht, VMR, together with Tilburg University. My name is Jonathan van Schuren. I'm a professor of international and European environmental law at Tilburg University and a member of the board of the Environmental Law Association. And I will be the moderator of this webinar. I would like to welcome Dr. Berti Suman, a legal researcher who is currently based in Italy at the European Commission's Joint Research Center in Ispra. There she researches the potential of citizen sensing for environmental litigation and mediation. She obtained the Rubicon grant from the Dutch Research Council and WO to do that. And you may remember her as she already did a workshop with the Netherlands Environmental Law Association before. Back then, she discussed how citizen sensing influences the governance of environmental risks. That previous talk was based upon her PhD research at Tilburg University. This time, Anna will discuss how citizen sensing can be used in litigation and mediation on environmental cases, using an example related to oil extraction in Italy. In a minute, I will give her the floor. She will first give a presentation, which will be recorded. We will make sure that nobody will be visible during the recording. And after this presentation, there will be ample room for questions and discussion. And since we are with a relatively small group, you will be allowed to pose your questions yourself using your camera and microphone. And this part will not be recorded. Now it's time to give the floor to Anna to give the presentation. Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. I guess if you're here, you have some interest in this topic. So it's great to have such a diverse group around, in a sense, although virtual. It would have been way nicer to be in front of you, as we did quite some time ago. It seems ages, but I treasure still the discussion we had back then and the discussion on the Aarhus Convention, access to information. And I think some of the discussion we'll have this afternoon is partially related, but maybe will be a bit more applied, as I will start from a case that I could witness in person during my fieldwork. I'm calling you and talking to you from Lombardy, northern Italy. And I think it's still important to say where we are, as at the moment it seems that we are everywhere and nowhere. And I could be in Basilicata before we were back in a red zone. So that was particularly useful because, as I will tell you more through the presentation, I think it's really different being on site rather than like listening to the stories and hearing the stories, let's say, by phone or from videos. So I will try to share my screen, but I would welcome if you have any questions that are immediate to just put them in the chat or keep them for the discussion later on. And also, I know this can be a bit unusual, but if my, let's say, reflection triggering you some drawing, I always welcome drawings shared after presentation and talks, because with an artist, we are collecting an image-based findings database. So basically, if whatever I say triggers in you some drawing, feel free to take a picture, send it back to me after this webinar, as it becomes also a little bit more physical than just watching to a screen. So let me start sharing. So can you see my full screen? I cannot see you, so maybe somebody can give me a yes.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so as Jonathan kindly introduced, this afternoon I'm going to talk about the potential of citizen sensing for litigation and mediation. And I would like to qualify that is the potential of collected data, but of course also of this whole process of engaging with the production of information that can be particularly valuable but for litigation and for mediation. So, okay, it seems that with this full screen, I will just pause a moment because it seems that with this full screen, it doesn't move this way. So I will share this other one. Can you see fully? Can you see the whole screen?
Yes, this is fine. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm talking to you from two hats, from the European Commission Joint Research Center, but also from the Tilburg Institute for Law, Technology and Society, from Tilburg Law School, because Tilburg Law School is seconding me at the JRC. So I can be in both countries with one grant, let's say. And the project in which this fieldwork is inserted is called Sensing for Justice, and is in fact about citizen sensing as a source of evidence in environmental litigation, but also as a tool for environmental mediation. So, as I was saying, I'm just back from the fieldwork in Basilicata. So compared to other presentations where the images are taken from some open repositories, these are pictures taken by a photographer, Andrea Marinelli, and I thank him for making available these pictures. I'm also inserting in the presentation some links, so afterwards you can go back to the slides and also discover more about the project on its website. So let me start. So the first of all, also another thanks is to Alice, who is the artist, and she's doing a fantastic job of trying to tell these stories through drawing. And we use this, let's say, this unusual approach because we believe that complex legal concepts can be conveyed better also through images. So the case of Basilicata is essentially a story of clash. And clash, let's say, between citizen, institutions, and private actors. And the private actors are also, in a sense, public, because there's companies, oil companies specifically, where the public actor is one of the main shareholders. So in a sense, it's an entangled story where battles are being combated on a number of fronts. So against the government for failing to comply with environmental law and enforcing people's right to live in a healthy environment and to access to environmental information, but also among the government and the company and the citizen. So it's complex, but we will go through it step by step. But first of all, I would like to use some quotes gathered on field. This is a quote from a producer of ricotta. It's a form of cheese. And the companies, the person said that they had to stop the production because he or she realized to be a death dealer. Basically, the person received a number of notifications from the public authority that the water streams leading to his or her farm were polluted with cancerogenic elements, and the water couldn't be used anymore. He could either decide to use another stream, but where? And so the person decided to shut down his or her business. Now, this is clearly a story of distrust because the person that we interviewed in that case was particularly frustrated because one day the authorities were telling them that the water was contaminated and couldn't be used, and then the day after everything was fine. So this conflictive information are triggering in these people a sense of distrust, mistrust in the competent authorities that should instead be proactive in providing information. And maybe some of you don't know, but Basilicata is one of the main European hub for oil extraction. And all this oil is basically sent to Taranto to be refined, but there's also bad oil, in a sense, the waste of oil extraction that stays in Basilicata and has a number of implications that I will tell you in the next slides. Another quote, this person that we interviewed said, "We are a people without a father, and the institutions are trying to use the system to hide the situation or just remain silent." So of course, you need to know a bit of the Italian context where this situation is inserted to understand why these people feel that the institutions are so absent from the debate. So clearly, there are a number of interests at stake, and it goes without saying that all this oil extraction is beneficial for some, but clearly strongly problematic for others. So there is a perception of covered truths. And I will tell you more what does this means through mentioning to the legal debate that is ongoing there. So there are, let's say, two angles to be considered. One is the way the companies, the oil companies, expanded on Basilicata. So how they appropriated the land. And the other is what is going on the land. So once the company starts operating. And let me also mention a sort of disturbing aspect, which is a number of ongoing studies, and one is just starting now, that is trying to search for element of hydrocarbons in the in livers of animals. Because it seems that on the second front, so the impact that the oil companies having on the land is becoming pervasive to the point that can be visible in the same organism of the animals and why not of the people. And there is a study that is being launched on the effects that living in an oil contaminated land has on humans, focusing on hair and skin. But this is still a small study, so let's say we cannot say much, and there is also one expert on that, let's say, in this call. But I think that this search for correlation is also matter for the use of citizen-generated data in the context of litigation. So there are some evidence that are already being collected. And in this picture, you can see a civic centrist, so basically a layman, which is trying to collect and to identify the presence of what seems contamination in the water. And of course, this contamination is often very close to extraction sites. And of course, then the correlation is a little bit a step further, but ongoing action on site is trying to build this correlation. Let me say that the people on site have a mix of frustration and faith. So we interviewed a person who, since ages, is trying to collect all the kind of letters from authorities and the proceedings itself that I will introduce to you in a moment. And he's really trying to follow all the steps and want to understand. And this person seemed to have a strong faith in the law, which to me was really impressive, because this person tried to kind of trust something, and he decided to trust the legal system. And this person even mentioned to me that he wants to go one day to the European Court of Human Rights. And it's impressive that despite all the controversies on the site, he still believes in a sort of overarching system of justice. So let me say that there are two litigations I want to introduce to you. So, and I won't make names and so on. So then for reference, we keep it to the discussion. So one litigation is focusing on the forced kind of expulsion of people from their land to let the company operate. And there there is the claim that the authority and the oil company kind of together were cooperating for having farmers and breeders letting their lands for nothing, for very lower estimation of the value of their lands. So there are still farmers that are claiming that they were forced, basically with threats and so on, to let their lands for a very lower price than their values and let the company operate. And those that resisted had to face a really hard time. Instead, the other litigation that is at stake here is a litigation about the sort of the environmental disaster that the operation implied on the land. And this mostly is based on the falsification of waste characterization certificates, but also a mispractice of reinjection of oil contamination in the land. So instead of properly disposing of the oil byproducts, these products were reinjected in the land, which caused the fact that the people would then find in their lands oil eruptions that couldn't be explained but from this practice of reinjection. So the evidence so far have been mostly based on official evidence. So basically the civic component here is only in potential, in the sense that the interested people using water samples, oil samples, but also evidence, for example, on seismicity, kind of triggered the action either from authorities that came there and investigated on site, or lawyers that then supported the citizen took the action and asked for expert evidence on site. So basically the evidence at the moment, the civic evidence, is used rather as a trigger than as a sort of institutional way to claim rights vis-a-vis a court. So this is different from other countries and other case studies of this project, where rather the evidence was used in courts per se. Here, the evidence are used mostly either for citizens for self-information or to trigger institutional action. And when I'm saying citizen for self-information, I mean that some breeders and farmers also reported to us that they moved to their, for example, their cows or their sheep to another land because of these eruptions and because of finding oil contaminants in the water. So the parties, we are talking about criminal proceedings where the public prosecutors, Italian public prosecutors, are against private actors or publicly participated actors, and the citizens are mostly the sort of civic interested party. And what is interesting there is that there seems to be also sort of shame on the lawyers, in the sense that the lawyers that take up the challenge to face the oil company, then they also have to face a lot of consequences of disengagement. And the citizens that stand as affected civic parties are also in a struggle at the moment. So the status, so one litigation is still open, the other is closed. So one will go on and the hearing is postponed to next year, whereas the other basically ended in almost nothing because of prescription, and also largely due to the long-lasting nature of litigation in Italy. And so this is really frustrating, because having criminal charges being dismissed for prescription, I think is really frustrating, both for the affected citizen and for the overarching system. However, it's not up to me in this context to judge this. But what I can see is that even if part of this proceeding has been dismissed, the embedded problems stay. And when I'm talking about embedded problems, I mean that the oil in Basilicata is basically financing schools, financing cities, financing theaters, and so on. And of course, these royalties prevent another type of development, which is a development based on the farms and agriculture and eventually sustainable tourism. And so for example, one of the breeder that we met, he didn't want to be interviewed as such. He said, "This is my life. I live off that. So what can I do?" And he also said, "So if the law does not ask to look for heavy metals in my milk, why do I have to look for them?" So basically, he was really upset that the authorities were not searching better and more into the kind of implication that this oil extraction would have for example, dairy production. And one of the things that personally shocked me is that this person said that the milk is not sold in Basilicata, but to big food chain, and making names of this kind of huge dairy product companies. And this was shocking for me because basically are the kind of products that reach our tables. Now, let me move to another aspect that I think is still very much important in this context. So it's the state of fear that is basically ongoing there. And if you see this, so the ugly drawings are made by me, the nice one are made by Alice. And these were just really early drawings that I just made on my notebook while I was on site. So they are ugly, but they really tell what I was seeing it in that moment. And we were just visiting a site, and there was a strong presence of the private security that was basically watching over us, watching over some local sensing citizens that were supporting us in the collection of water samples. And that became even worse when we realized that some institutional police force blocked us and asked us what we were doing, which to me was quite distressing because we were just on public land taking picture. We weren't within any private property, and I felt that we were doing something wrong. And this remind me a quote that I could collect on site, where a person said that they were treated as terrorists, where they were just providing information. And I think this is important, as we sometimes forget, and I sometimes forget as an Italian, that these things also happen in our European very advanced countries, and not just in, for example, the Amazon in South America, but also here in our lands. And I think another important aspect is the role of the media, because when the institutions are not listening, then the media can amplify or hide the voice of the sensing citizen. So one of the points that they stressed is that, of course, any kind of criminal proceedings is also fed by the push that media have, and that have both on society and on the government, because we've seen that most of the recent proceedings that ended up in a big success were also very much amplified by media. And so these two journalists from a local, news outlet, they said that basically we need, so journalists, the media needs the sensing citizens, but also vice versa. So the citizen need to be amplified by the media, and the media needs them to have fresh on-site evidence. One of the journalists told me that recognize the right to contribute to environmental information would legitimize the action of investigative journalists and citizens that act as informers. And I think it's particularly important here to talk about right to contribute, because as you saw, in Basilicata, citizens may struggle to perform their monitoring. It's not as easy as it could be in other parts of Italy or the world. And secondly, I think also the role of scientists is particularly important because, for example, in our field work, scientists from recognized institutions were collecting these levers. And basically, these could support the civic sentries because they could provide them outlets to be heard that are, for example, scientific publication, and of course, a civic group with the sort of backing of a scientist can be way more powerful than alone. So basically, scientists could also decide, let's say, where they want to perform their analysis. But of course, then they are scientists and not advocate, so they should not advocate for a cause or the other. But of course, performing their research on site and inquiring themselves, it's particularly important because it's either undermine or support the claims of the local citizen. So let me bring this discussion to an end with two final thoughts. So first, I think we were talking about citizen sensing, but there is way more. So we are talking about, of course, right to a healthy environment, right to access environmental information, but also freedom of information, freedom of expression, and again, right to health, but also to live in dignity. Because I think when you find your freedom of information so much at risk, also your own dignity and your own feeling of a citizen becomes at stake. And in this image, in the drawing, there is a person who's saying, I'm a journalist, not a terrorist. And I think each sensing citizen is a sort of informer of the broader society and should be treated as such, not as a terrorist. And lastly, if I would kind of summarize the lessons, I would say that first of all, as an overarching, let's say, methodological reflection, it's really important to be on site, to go on field work, and to touch with your hands, because many of my assumptions were completely overturned. For example, the idea that the civic sentry is an activist, is an environmental motivated person. I found that the most genuine civic sentry is a farmer or a breeder that is just caring about their land, nothing more and nothing less. So it's really this pristine attachment to your own land. Then I also realized that citizen sensing entails a query for a response. So citizen on site wants a response from the institution. That could be either a conviction of the company in a proceeding or a sort of alternative dispute resolution. So for example, a settlement with the company that is meaningful also for the citizen, and most importantly, that is also led by the affected citizen. And lastly, a sort of differentiated trust and faith. So basically, the people that I encountered were trusting something, but not the local government. They were trusting the EU institution, for example. They were trusting the judiciary. So they were trusting something that was beyond their own narrow reality. And I think this is encouraging because it means that there can still be faith and hope, but just there are different types of answers that these people are seeking. So, and with this image that asks a why, that a farmer asks to herself when she saw some big containers of oil in her own farm. And I think this just triggers us a question on why these things are happening where we already saw them somewhere else in the world, but still keeps happening and duplicating the issues that we are seeing all around the world, and particularly now I'm talking about my own country. So I would like to thank you all and go back to my face. And as you can see, I'm particularly passionate about that. So I apologize if something sounded really engaged, but I hope this could then stimulate a vibrant discussion. And I would also very much welcome also any kind of statement that Lorenzo or Giorgio that joined the journey with me would like to make in this context. Thank you.
Okay, Anna, thank you very much. It was a nice presentation. I don't think in the Netherlands we have oil production on land. Of course, we have it on at sea, but of course, with natural gas production, which also leads to a lot of environmental issues. And I think just today was in the news some report about pneumonia around Tata Steel because of these graphite rains. So I think we have similar types of issues in the Netherlands as well. So I'm looking forward to questions and discussions. So as I said before, we're a small group, so feel free to just unmute yourself and ask a question. And I will check if a lot of people do it at the same time. I will intervene, but let's just see how the natural process goes. So please go ahead.